This is peculiar. So before we get into this video, I think I need to give you all a few updates. The first of which being, I am recording this video on a new camera. But it's weird having a viewfinder. Hello self, you look great. I can't figure out how to do the white balance on this camera, so I look very shadowy. But that's okay, we can deal. I'm in a new location. This is my aunt's house where we're staying after we moved. This is my very sad bookshelf because I had to put most of my books in storage. Also, I'm sick or developing a sickness, so my throat is like, shut up, but my brain is like, go for this video. In the beginning of December, I was reading like heck. I was spitting fire, it was fun, it was great. I read 3 books in 3 days and I was like, we're gonna do the TBR this month, pronto. Then finals hit, then moving out hit, then work hit, and basically these are the only 3 books I've read this month, period, and it's like more than halfway through December at this point. And I didn't want to wait until the end of the month to talk about these because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna forget about what I thought about them by then, so I thought might as well just do a wrap up right now of the 3 books I read in the beginning of this month while they're still fresh in my mind. Without further ado, let us get into that. So the first book that I read in December was, I believe, from my November TBR, and I just kind of pushed it over and read it this month. That book is Lock-In by John Scalzi. This book follows a world where a disease has broken out called Hayden's syndrome. A lot of people that got it died, but there's a select population of people who got Hayden's syndrome and then they experienced a condition called lock-in, where pretty much your body is still alive and functioning, but it's like you're in a coma. So the solution to this is that they have created these kind of robots where if you have lock-in, you can insert your mind into a robot and like still continue to move around and exist. So it takes place in that world, and this book follows a murder, and someone with Hayden's is helping a regular person solve that crime. It's basically just a crime novel set in a sci-fi setting with robots and dystopia and all that good shenanigans. So this book took me a little bit to get through because I was pretty bored reading it. I guess I can say I'm not the hugest sci-fi fan. I enjoyed it, but I think I would enjoy this more as a movie. I think sci-fi for me is funner to watch in movie form than it is to read it, but maybe what hindered my experience with this is the crime aspect of it, because I'm not the biggest crime fan either, or like thriller mysteries. It just wasn't interesting to me very much, and in the beginning it took so much to get into this because you don't understand the world. It took me forever to realize that the lock-in people had these robot bodies, and I was like, what are they talking about? I am so dark. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to fix the white balance. This is an embarrassing first video. The characters in this just seemed kind of normal-ish flat to me. I wasn't impressed by that at all. By the end of this book, it had taken me so long to read that I had forgotten who a lot of the characters in the beginning were, so whenever it started to unravel who the person that caused these murders and stuff was revealed, I was like, okay, but who are you? Overall, this book was just kind of meh for me. It took a little too long to get into, so I couldn't mark it down as just an enjoyable read. It was interesting. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it was a cool world, and take from that what you will. I gave this book 2 stars. The next book I read, I picked up on a whim. I was feeling some more audiobooks, and so I knew I had this one and I just went for it. So I listened to The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. I know you're not supposed to pronounce the K in Khaled. I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong. This book is really popular. I'd be surprised if you haven't heard of it. It is a book set in the Middle East in the 70s onward. 70s? Awesome. 80s? Oh. How can I pinpoint a synopsis to this? It pretty much just follows his life. He and his best friend that he grew up with and losing contact with him, and then going back to Afghanistan. I think it's set in Afghanistan. Now let me disclaim that my reading experience might have been hindered by listening to the audiobook rather than reading a physical copy, because the writing was beautiful. I loved how things were described and it was really pretty. So listening to it on audio, maybe that aspect might have been lost on me just a little bit because hearing it is different from reading it. But I liked this a lot, and I think it has a really good message, really intricate themes and a very new reading experience, especially since I rarely read books that are set in Afghanistan or the Middle East or places around there. I'm not a judge to say, oh, this is so realistic, but I would go to say it's realistic. It's just the right amount of disturbing and tragic to make it meaningful, but it's not tragic and disturbing just to be obscene. And when I say tragic, I mean it's one of those that just tugs on your heartstrings, and I was hollering. It's a book that's so well thought out, and the message is so clear that it's frustrating. I was frustrated reading this. I was feeling a lot of emotions. I was very angry. I was happy. I was sad. This just had a full spectrum of emotions that it elicited in me, and I give it great credit for that. Some parts of this book dragged. It was a little bit long-winded. It's how many pages? Over 400 pages? No, just under 400 pages. In the end, it does pack a great message, and again, it's set in Afghanistan, which I thought was interesting, and just the entire premise of the book is really touching and new, and I would recommend this book to you, and I definitely understand why it's on a ton of reading lists because it's just awe-inspiring in a way. I gave this book 3 stars, even though I did think it had a good meaning in the end. It just took a lot to get there. Next book I read was one that I just have had people tell me constantly, I need to read this soon, and I finally went for it. The 3rd book I read this month was Forbidden by Tabitha Suzuma. This book follows the 2 siblings, Locken. Did I say it right? And, oh, I'm not gonna look. Maya. I still got it. They live in a family with only a single mother who is constantly absent. She's abusive. She is negligent. They have 3 other siblings that they're responsible for. It's a crazy household, and they're under a ton of stress between school and Locken having social anxiety. Just many other factors occur where Locken and Maya start to fall in love. So, on that note, this book does follow incest. It's one that I've heard a ton about, and I've always been like, do I want to read that? I don't know. The final verdict is, I am very glad I read this. My initial thoughts about this book are, how the heck did this get published in YA? Because first of all, that's kind of a very taboo subject, especially to be kind of contained in a YA category. And second of all, it's pretty explicit. So whoever had put the okay on this book was really reaching for some kind of reaction. I'm not saying that's bad. I really respect this book. Once again, like the Kite Runner, it's very graphic and disturbing, but it's not that way just to be obscene. There's a message behind it. A lot of people might read this book and be like, oh, that's so disgusting. It's just exploiting that topic for readership, and it really, I think it's so different. It's the only book I've read about this other than The Mortal Instruments, but I don't think that counts, where it talks about this subject. It's so heartbreaking, and you understand where it's coming from, I think is the main point, to exaggerate. There's so much character role and emotional development that it makes sense, and it flows really well, and the storyline is just done so nicely that I think it worked. I'm not saying it was okay, but it worked, and I understood where it was coming from. It wasn't just like, oh ew, this author is writing this just because they can. This book was really fast-paced. This book was written so wonderfully. I actually loved the writing of this book. I mentioned this earlier, but I want to expand on it. Locken has social anxiety, and so he never speaks to anyone outside of his family, and he's very quiet in class. This book involves panic attacks, and I think for a book about anxiety, it's done very well. I read so many books about mental illness and anxiety and stuff like that where I'm just like, but I think this book really captures it, and it involves it really well into a story that's already jam-packed with emotion and other issues. It's just nestled in there very realistically. I like the way that was handled. This author knows how to write things along those subjects, and I really respect her. I gotta say, there's only a couple of ways this story could have ended the way it was going, and it was predictable, but oh man, I wasn't expecting that. And I think there's something about people telling me I cried so hard reading this, you're gonna cry, it was miserable, I was sobbing, that made me not cry. People jinxed me. But this was a very interesting read. I'll be thinking about it for a long time. I'll probably reread it down the road. It makes you wonder. It makes you think. I gave this book 4.5 stars. So thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to be doing more videos here in this comfy chair by this bookshelf. Hello Shatter Me series. Hello Shatter Me series. Ma'am.